Hello, you are listening to the Divorce University online podcast with your hosts, Thomas and Tammy Ferreira.
Hi, I'm Tammy.
And I'm Thomas.
And we are back. And today's episode is called Brevity Is Effective. So we're going to be brief.
Brevity is the soul of wit.
It is?
Yes. Who said that?
I don't know. Is that why you listen to those little one-liner dad jokes?
Yes.
Thomas found this podcast because we do consume other podcasts. Is it called the Dad Joke Podcast?
It's dad jokes, yeah.
Dad jokes. And it's all one-liners, and the guy's just completely deadpan in the whole thing. And Thomas will turn it on, and he'll have his headphones in, and he'll be over there, and he's shaking with laughter. And I'm like, what are you doing? And then he'll start sharing it with me and his kids in the car, and we're all like, ugh.
Like a friend of mine glued his autobiography to himself. I told him I didn't believe him, but he said that's his story, and he's sticking to it.
See? But like that. It's ridiculous.
I think that's funny.
It's not. It's so stupid, though. It's not funny. Like.
Yeah, no, I think those are hysterical. I really do.
And
they're brief.
They're brief. They do have the gift of brevity.
But there's a lot of what do you call them? Proverbs or affirmations or aphorisms about being brief, and it's all true. It's kind of like when I go into I take a lot of continuing education of the law, and a lot of it's on legal writing. And eliminate words, be brief, be concise is the operative word. And part of it, I mean, have you ever been sitting there and somebody's telling a story and you're waiting for the punchline? And then you wait.
And then your eyes start to glaze over.
Right. And you're going, when is this person going to get to the point? At some point, you stop listening.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, you shut it off.
And that's human nature. And some of us, it happens more too than others. I confess I have a somewhat short attention span sometimes.
Yes, you do.
What's that guy? He says, my wife says I don't listen to her, but to be fair to me, she is a poor summarizer.
Right. Yeah, there's a comedian that says that. Yeah.
I think that's funny, and that's true with men and women, right?
Right.
Women.
We want the details.
That's right. You want the details.
Yeah.
What? Yeah. Joe's getting a divorce. What happened? Did he have an affair? What happened? I don't know.
Got a better chance of getting an answer out of the dog. Oh goodness, that's a bilingual joke too.
So yeah, but the thing is, when you're persuading people, or even when you're interacting, it's effective to be concise and be brief, and I think that's important to understand in several contexts. One of them is co-parenting communication. It's good to be brief when you're communicating. When you're addressing the court, when you're talking, it's good to be brief. And when you're writing things that will be read by the court or by a decision maker, it's good to be brief. In general, it's good to be brief in any kind of communication where you're trying to persuade.
Well, and the irony in the co-parenting part of it is that the brevity, the lack of brevity, it tends to cause greater problems. The more I didn't start that sentence well. The more,
it was a train wreck.
The more high conflict the other person is, the more important it is to be brief.
Right.
Because the more high conflict personality you're dealing with on the other side, and the more you communicate, the more ammunition you're giving them to come back and try to twist and turn and use against you and put words in your mouth and all those kinds of things.
Yeah, yeah. So you want to not give them the ammunition they need to fire at you later.
Right.
Or give them a hook
Right. A hook. That's what
to drive the communication off of its intended purpose.
And that's what high conflict personalities do a lot of.
Yeah.
I mean, I say to clients, sometimes, clients will be ordered, they're using, Our Family Wizard or Talking Parents or some app. And they'll say, well, we have a court order that I have to respond within, 12 hours or 24 hours or whatever it is. And I say, okay, well, if it's just a bunch of, if you read through there and there's no question, there's no thing to answer, and it's just attacks of you or the situation or whatever, you can just write back and say, receive.
Yeah. Or like Mr. Spock used to say, acknowledged.
Right. Right. And I'm not going to argue with you. I'm going to decline the argument.
Right. Yes. And if you're going to use that strategy, you should be brief.
Right.
I love the one-word response.
Right.
It basically says everything you need to say.
Right.
Not, I'm just tired of arguing with you. All we ever do is go around and around with these arguments, and every time they escalate,
right.
And then somebody says something they shouldn't say, and then you won't speak to me for a whole week. So if you could possibly, just this once, not share everything that's going on in your house with me, I would appreciate it. Right. Thank you very much for your attention to this message.
That is the kind of thing you see. It is. It's like you have to get all your feelings out there. They don't need to know any of that. You just say receive. It's really crazy how when I start working with clients and I start teaching them some of these principles, which brevity is one of the key ones. But you start teaching them these principles, and then the communication starts to shift, and the other person stops attacking them, and they start not having anxiety every time they get a message, and they start like knowing what to say and how to respond and having confidence in that. And it can shift your whole world, because that co-parenting interaction has a lot of impact on your day-to-day happiness.
Yeah. And consider the purpose of that communication. Really, it's more to handle logistical issues than anything else.
Right.
I see co-parenting relationships where people use talking parents to exchange pictures and talk about what happened at the birthday party. And I really don't think that's a good idea. I remember when I was first doing this that somebody suggested that there be a journal that goes back and forth so that the parents could have an idea of what's going on in the other world. I think that's a terrible idea.
It's okay if you have really high cooperation.
Yeah.
We could probably
nobody.
do that. Right. We could probably do that now at this point, but your kids are 17 and 18, so it's pointless.
Yeah, they'd probably forget it anyway.
Yeah.
Leave it at mom's and we never see it again.
Yeah, because they're teenagers and they don't care about us.
What? You want me to write something?
But in the beginning...
Can I make a video?
Put it on TikTok. Oh, my goodness. Snapchat. But in the beginning,
In the beginning.
I think especially, most people cannot handle that level of view into the other person's world.
That's right. And so it's not really important that they know what your house rules are, or whether the kids stayed up late at night, or whether whether they had fun at the birthday party, or whether Junior tripped over one of his presents and landed face first in the cake. It doesn't matter.
Right.
Junior wants to tell you that. He'll tell you that.
Right.
But it's not necessary that be communicated. Mostly, the communication is for things like appointments and healthcare and school. I mean, a lot of times you need to tell the other parent, it looks like Johnny's got a couple F's on his report card. I'm wondering if he should I'm wondering if he should get some tutoring. Yeah.
It's funny because, so this is a good example.
Yeah.
I have a coaching client who has a child that makes very good grades overall. Yeah. A's and B's, very good student, and came up with a C on one test during parenting time.
Yep.
So Dad sent this pretty involved message and said, you know, obviously you don't care about the child's schooling and you're not, whatever you're doing, it's not working. I'm paraphrasing the message, but, you know, whatever you're doing, it isn't working. And I think that I should come and get the child on your school days so that I can work with the child on their homework because you're clearly not doing well with it.
Right. And my response to that would be, are you insane?
No, that wouldn't really be your
response. It wouldn't be.
My response to that would be, F you.
Like that.
That would be my response.
Yeah.
But, and that's what you want to say. And most people in that situation would write back and say, well, this is just ridiculous. You know, 1 C out of, you know, all A's and B's. And remember that time, you know, 6 months ago when the child got, you know, a C on this assignment and this was on your parenting time. And here's how many C's you've had. And here's how many C's I've had on my parenting time. And well, like people go into all this kind of thing trying to justify. Okay. And I think a lot of times what happens is they have this fear of, well, it's one or two things. They're either angry at the other person and want to say F you, which is what my thing would be, or they're afraid that somehow that statement in a messaging app that can't be deleted that the court could potentially see is going to be used against them.
Well, yeah.
And so they start thinking, oh my gosh.
Well, he leads off with a personal attack.
Yeah, this other parent documented that the child had a C during my parenting time, so am I now going to lose my kid? You know, or he's going to get more custody or whatever. Right. That's what starts.
And the answer could be something very short as, you know, let's say the C was in math. Why don't we get him a math tutor? ? Would you like to pay for half? ?
Right.
Or can you pay for half?
Right. And I think what I told the person to say was just...
Sometimes that's enough to discourage them, right?
That's true. Because especially if they're lazy and that will cause them to have to do something.
Or if they have to pay the tutor.
The tutor. Some people are, financially that's an issue. But I think what I told them to say is something along the lines of, I am handling the, I'm handling the school things on my parenting time as I'm sure you are on yours, or something like that. I mean, I think I had them just send back something real,
what they call anodyne, really uncontroversial, like elevator music.
Right. And a lot of times, like in that kind of thing too, if you're not ordered to respond in some way, I probably wouldn't even respond to that.
Yeah.
Because when the other parent sends something that says, and maybe that is this has been several months ago this happened, so I may have said that too. I may have said, just don't respond. Because when the other parent sends something like, oh, they got a C on one test and I now want to come during your parenting time and pick up the kid, that's so ridiculous that it's just not even, that's just so ridiculous. I don't even know what other word to use for it. That's craziness.
Yeah.
So it's like you don't even give it any credence. You just don't even respond to it.
You don't dignify it with
you don't dignify it with a response. That's right. That's right.
Acknowledged.
Right.
Acknowledged.
Thank you for your input.
Thank you for your very helpful suggestions.
Thank you for your perspective. Whatever it is, like whatever is something that you.
That's sarcastic, though. You got to be careful.
I know, but you can be sarcastic if you're sarcastic, just ever so slightly where you can't be called on it. Then you can be sarcastic.
I don't think so.
I do that.
I don't know. The goal is not to inflame the other side.
I know you don't want to inflame the other side, but I also think.
But it sure is tempting.
Well, I think there's a difference though between inflaming them and drawing a boundary.
Yeah.
You have to find that balance. And honestly, it's different in every case. That balance is different in every case. When I am coaching people, I find that some people can come up much closer to the line than other people. I think that's true even in our own cases. Like, we can get much closer to the line with your ex-wife than we can with my ex-husband.
Yeah.
My ex-husband, either anybody, you get too close, you get sucked into the vortex, as Thomas calls it. So I have to stay way back to keep from getting sucked into the vortex. That's just the dynamic of our relationship. But yeah, I mean, I think you have to draw that boundary, but you also can't get, sucked into the conflict. And so, yeah, I mean, people come across with really crazy things that are just super insane. But again, that doesn't make it true. And you don't need to be all reactive to it, thinking that it's going to have any credibility.
The thing I like about saying maybe we should get a tutor is it's a solution it's a solution focused response.
Uh-huh.
It acknowledges what he said, so he doesn't feel like you're not listening.
Yeah.
And instead of firing back, it proposes a solution.
Right.
And it puts it illustrates a potential burden on the other party. Yeah. I think the elephant in the room is, okay, he got a C. It's still a passing grade.
Right.
It's like, I'd be delighted if my kids had it.
Please, Lord, let it be a C. We're praying the opposite prayer.
Come on, C.
Yeah. True.
Oh.
It's very, very true. But you had another case where you had Dad in this case. You were representing Dad, and the child is still under 5 in this case, very young, and so there are just threads and threads and threads of messages where they're going back and forth arguing about something. Yeah. It's like, well, you didn't drop the kid off at the preschool until 5, and then they said that you were supposed to be there at 4:50, and then you went in and talked to the teacher, and you said this or that thing, and they don't want you coming there anymore, and blah blah blah. And then
everything you just said is a lie.
Yeah, and then the other side comes back and says, none of that's true. I actually showed up to the preschool at 4:57, and I, only talked to the person that, I got the child from, and I never asked that question, and they didn't say blah blah blah. Like, and it's just this constant, and then the other side comes back. Well, I know for a fact that you did because such and such person told me that blah blah blah. It's like this continuous cycle of where they're just arguing the points of the situation. It's
like having a front seat to their marital bickering.
Right. Right. And really what you have to get down to, and this is true in these situations especially, but even in relationships, like even in marriage or whatever, you have to be careful that you're not just in this cycle of arguing with the other person, but you get to the point where you say, okay, so what's the solution?
Yeah.
How do we prevent this from happening again? And I'm sorry, you're hearing our I'll call him our grand dog. Thomas doesn't love that term, but my son's dog, he's a little part beagle, part beagle, and what's the other thing? Oh, dachshund. You should know that by looking at him. Anyway, so he's a little high strung. So if he hears any little fly buzzing about the room, he barks.
He's a dockle.
Yeah. So he's here with us this week. But anyway, so I apologize for that. But they get so into this situation where they're arguing the points that nobody's coming up with a solution anymore.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, we can argue back and forth about our difference of opinion until the cows come home. But how does that change anything?
Right. And I would say if your response is more than one sentence,
it's too much.
It's probably too much.
Well, and in this particular case, you said at the end, and this was before we started working with the person, you were looking at some historic messages. And finally, they got down to the end where one of them just finally said, I think we've jumped the shark. Yeah, we beat a dead horse. Like, I don't know what else to say. Yeah. Like, we're both just arguing. They actually exhausted the argument so much that they came to that conclusion themselves of like.
It's like it just fizzled out after. Yeah. I'm too exhausted to do this anymore.
Yeah. So if you can't come up with a solution, maybe you just agree to disagree.
Yeah.
You don't argue with them. If you don't agree and there's no good solution, then just let it go.
Right.
You know?
Right. So try to be brief. try to say a lot with little words.
Right.
And that's, again, what I like about the idea of proposing a solution, which it sends several messages. It says, I was listening. I heard what you said. I, to a little bit of an extent, share your concerns, even though I don't really.
Right.
But let's get a tutor, and he'll probably start doing better after that.
Right.
And if he comes back with, well, the problem is that you don't help him with his homework, not acknowledged, because that might be an admission. Received.
I like received. I do. I use that word a lot.
Yeah. And then he'll say, when are you going to take responsibility for his homework? Received. You're not responding to me the way you're supposed to on Talking Parents. Received.
And I'll tell you this. I will tell you this for sure. When you're dealing with a high conflict personality on the other side, like, narcissistic behaviors, bipolar, borderline, things that, and not all bipolars are like that, but a lot of them cycle. So they'll have periods where they're like that, but then periods where, they're calmer. And I think even with medication, there is usually some irregularity that's like beyond their control. And so, part of what you start to recognize is you can start to see the pattern in the other person. That's been, I've had that experience multiple times, is like where I can step back and say, okay, I know this is just the cycle of this person because I know this person and I know how these things happen. Mm-hmm. And it's easier to have a little more grace. But I will tell you that what will happen is if you start shutting it down like that and you're saying received or whatever, what's going to happen at the very beginning, mark my words, they're going to ramp up.
Right.
Because they're not getting what they want from you. Because they almost like they want to fight or they want to know that they've gotten under your skin.
Right.
So I'm going to like poke, metaphorically, right? I'm physically poking Thomas. If you're on the video, you see that. If you're on the podcast, you don't.
You better knock that off.
But they poke, and then you don't react.
Yeah. And
then you got to poke a little harder, and then you don't react. And then I'm going to poke harder, right? So they're ramping up verbally.
Yeah.
Because you're not giving them the reaction that they're seeking.
Right.
But eventually, if you can hold the line, that's what I say, hold that line, they'll get the message and they'll stop because
I'm exhausted.
Right. and they're not getting by not giving them what they're looking for, there's no payoff there.
Yeah.
So they stop with the behavior. I always liken it to, your 3-year-old. It's always the 3-year-old, right? That's having the tantrum on the floor in the middle of the grocery store.
Yes.
You walk away from it and say, fine, if you're going to do that, then.
So your narcissistic ex is a 3-year-old.
That's
essentially,
right.
That's having a tantrum.
That's right.
And you're going to.
Ignore it.
Right.
You're going to ignore it until he or she stops having their fit.
Right. And then reward them when they exhibit the appropriate behavior.
That's That is how it works. Just like in the meantime, you're not going to argue with them. You're just gonna you do it by extinguishment.
Let me jump on because I wanted to cover declarations.
Yeah, because this comes up in court where people are too wordy.
Yeah, here the problem with most legal writing, and this includes attorneys, is that it's mind-numbingly boring, and after a while, you lose the thread.
Right.
And your eyes glaze over, and then you give up.
Right.
And then you just rule for the other side.
Yeah.
It's like, I can't understand this. The other side wins.
Right.
And the trick to this is what people do is they want to make sure that the court knows everything.
Right.
The fact is the court can't know everything.
Right.
And your attempts to provide them with every detail is going to cause them to not listen to you.
Right, about the things that are significant.
So the best way to approach that is to make some bullet points. What's the one thing that if the judge doesn't understand anything else about my points, what's the one point I want them to grasp?
Right.
That's point 1. What's the second most important one? That's point 2. And then the third one is point 3, and there is no point 4. If there's a point 4, they'll stop listening.
And when you say the most important, you're not how are we gauging importance? Because most people gauge importance through their emotions.
No, I'm talking about a concept. So point one might be, what do I want the court to do? It's always a good lead off for a declaration is, I am seeking this relief, XXX. Number two, I should have more parenting time because the other parent is not exercising the parenting time that they have. Okay. So you give that as your lead sentence, or even in a heading, and then give me two examples.
Right.
Just two examples.
Even though there are 30.
Even though, there might be hundreds. Just give me two and move on. The court will ask you if they need more examples. They'll ask you. But be brief, because you want to hold their attention. And then, point three. What was point three? I can't even remember. But give the point, in a concise way, and then give a couple of examples, being fairly specific as to the time, date, and this is important. How do you know?
And please don't let it be through the child.
Yeah, and that's the epistemological question. There's your word for the day, epistemology. The epistemology is the science of how you know stuff.
Right.
So you should describe in your declaration how you came across the information. If it's from your child, you might consider a different example.
Yeah, and one of the things I was saying is, like, when you're saying, tell the court, what you want them to know, or why you deserve more, or why you think you should have more parenting time. My thing is, those don't come from your emotions. I should have more parenting time because I don't like the fact that the child's staying up till 10 p.m. at his house.
Well, you can, by the way, just getting back to if it's from your child, you can use that effectively if you couch it in terms of your own concern. I'm concerned that that Junior is saying more and more that doesn't want to transition to dad.
Right.
He says he's afraid of, and I'm concerned that the punishments may be too harsh or whatever.
Right, but you have to pick things that are centered around the child's safety and well-being.
Yeah.
If it's a custody issue.
Yeah.
If it's a financial issue, those are a little easier because you just focus on the facts, which are the numbers, which is why I love finances. It's like 2 + 2 is 4, and it always is. There's no gray there. The child custody is a little more gray and difficult, but don't let your your examples or your requests be determined by by the things you're most emotional about. You need to determine that based on the things that the court finds important.
That's why you start with the result.
Right.
Start with the result you're looking for.
Right.
That's a good place to start.
Right.
And then,
because then I'm not just listing this list of all these complaints.
Right.
Because you don't want to just list your list of complaints. We talked about that a couple episodes ago, I think. But what you're saying is, figure out what you want the outcome to be, and then focus your examples around things that support that outcome.
Correct.
Not just things that I'm complaining about the other parent.
Right. So I think the court, I'm asking this court to initiate a 2-2-5 parenting plan. The current parenting plan of every other weekend is not enough time with the dad, and I'm concerned that, and then examples of how this is affecting your parent-child relationship.
Right.
And the 2-2-5, your second point might be that allows enough transitions, but avoids them going too long without seeing one of the parents. That's a good argument. Yeah. And it should be logical.
Right.
And kind of follow down a logical pathway towards a conclusion.
Right.
So I start with the concept or what I want, then a couple of examples, and then conclusion, and move on.
Right. Very good. Okay. So the moral of the story today is Be brief. That's the
Be
moral of the
short.
story.
Don't blah, 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 blah.
Brevity is more effective because you don't want your judge's eyes to glaze over. A lot of times when we have people that are complaining that their judge isn't listening or they don't feel like the court's listening, it's because they're giving them way too much to digest.
Like that.
Yeah. So, okay. So thanks for joining us. If you are watching us on YouTube, don't forget to hit like and subscribe to our channel so you get notified as new videos come out. If you're listening to the podcast, please rate and review us and subscribe to the podcast so that you're also notified of new episodes as they're released. And we'll talk to you next week.
See you then.
Thank you for listening to the Divorce University online podcast with your hosts, Thomas and Tammy Ferreira. For more information, visit www.divorceuniversityonline.com.